Today I'm interviewing Stephanie Smith-Lee, co-director of Policy and Advocacy of the National Down Syndrome Congress. Stephanie is a strong advocate for the disability community, especially in education. She is even a former director of the Office of Special Education Program, OSEP, at the U.S. Department of Education. Stephanie is here to talk about the Department of Education and the 50th anniversary of the Disabilities Education Act, IDEA, taking place at the end of November. So welcome, Stephanie.
Thank you for having me on, Liz.
There's been a lot going on at the Department of Education. Can you tell us what's happening and how it would impact students with disability? What do you think students with disability and their families need to understand about the Department of Education and the agencies in it, like OSERS and OCR?
Well, thank you, Liz. Those are very good questions. When you're asking what's going on at the Department of Education, some deeply disturbing actions have been taking place. Last March, about half of the staff were fired in the U.S. Department of Education, including many of the staff in the Office of Civil Rights. This is the office that protects children, students, and youth from discrimination. And the impact of the firings really has been very negative. Then we had a government shutdown, as you know, this past October 1. And during the government shutdown, uh, the offices that are most important to students with disabilities were just gutted. The Office of Special Education Programs, the Office of Civil Rights, and many other offices that are very important to students with disabilities. Now, we hear talk that this was due to the shutdown. No, a reduction in force is firing staff. So almost all of these staff were fired. Now, Congress decided to end the shutdown, and part of the deal was that those employees would be rehired through January 30th, but we have no guarantee that they wouldn't be fired again after January 30th. Then, just a couple of days ago, there was an announcement that the major functions or roles of 6 different offices within the department would be sent to other agencies. So the department is, in effect, offloading or sending key responsibilities to other agencies like the Department of Labor, Department of Interior, Department of Health and Human Services. And one of the things that's most disturbing for students with disabilities is that they're moving the programs that impact students who are in kindergarten through 12th grade to the Department of Labor, which has no expertise or experience. And one of the reasons that that's so bad for students with disabilities is that we have literally spent decades working to ensure collaboration between these offices and to break down the silos that exist between general and special education. Because, as you well know, students with disabilities are general education students first, and the special education is services and supports to help them be successful. So, dividing off to a different agency the parts that deal with K-12 education and students with disabilities is very disturbing. And even more disturbing is we're hearing from reliable sources that the Office of Special Education Programs is going to be moved to the Department of Health and Human Services. And IDEA, special education, is about education. It's not about health. and it has no business being moved to the Department of Health and Human Services.
Thank you. That's a helpful answer. On two words that I'm not sure that our audience will understand is gutted and silos. Can you explain them to us?
Well, when we talk about silos, what we're talking about is that too often in the past, special education teachers have been over here. Students with disabilities have been over here, often in separate classes and separate from general education. And that's what we mean by silos. And we don't want the students with disabilities separated off. We want them to be part of the education system. When I say gutted, that these offices were gutted, I mean that almost all of the employees were fired. So in the Office of Special Education Programs, it appeared that there were only two people left.
Okay, thank you. How does the Department of Education fulfill the promise of IDEA?
Well, that's a good question, how the Department of Education fulfills the promise of IDEA. Let's step back for a minute and think about where we were before 1975 when the first IDEA law was passed. Before 1975, there were 1.75 million children who were not allowed to go to school, and about 100,000 of them were in institutions. There was no guarantee of a right to education. There were no individualized education programs. So IDEA, since 1975, has guaranteed that every child with a disability has the right to be educated, that they'll have individualized supports through an individualized education program, and that there are procedures in place to ensure that their rights are followed. Now, over the last 50 years, and as you mentioned, we're about to celebrate the 50th anniversary of IDEA, we've made a lot of progress. So students now are part of the same assessment system, the same accountability system that other students are. We've added transition services, early intervention for babies and toddlers, and many other things. Now, I do have to say that we hear from families all the time that their child is not getting what they need, and this is not a perfect system. But blowing it up as we're seeing happen is not the answer. So the Department of Education is responsible for federal oversight and federal funding. So the Office of Special Education Programs is responsible for monitoring the states. That means that they look at what the states are doing and determine if they're responsibly supervising the local districts and schools to make sure that they're following the law. And if they're not, then they provide support to states to improve. And there's also corrective action plans that happen, steps that states have to take if they're not following the law to improve. The other important piece of it is the federal funding that goes to states and then to schools to help support educating students with disabilities. And then very important grant programs that OSEP funds. So these fund things like technical assistance centers and parent training and information centers. So the federal government plays a very important role in ensuring that the law is followed and in supporting states and schools and families.
Thank you. If getting rid of the Department of Education would hurt students with disability, what could Congress or the administration do that would actually help fulfill the promise of IDEA? What do we want to see going forward?
Okay, well, let's talk first about what could be done. The administration could stop scattering these offices among different agencies and start focusing on how to improve education for students with disabilities. I was appointed by President George W. Bush, and I'm proud to have worked for him because his focus was on leaving no child behind and improving education. I am not seeing a focus on improving education for any students, much less students with disabilities. Congress has an oversight responsibility. And what that means is that they're responsible for making sure that the Department of Education does what Congress said. And that is not happening. There are laws in place that require the department to fulfill their roles and responsibilities that are in the law. And instead, they're offloading, they're sending their responsibilities to other agencies. So Congress needs to immediately have bipartisan oversight hearings. And what that means is both Republicans and Democrats on the two important committees in the Senate and the House having oversight hearings, calling in the Department of Education and demanding answers and demanding that they follow the law. Oh,
Thank you.
oh, I'm sorry. You asked me another question about
Yes.
what else can
Wait,
be done to fulfill the promise.
yes.
And one thing that could be done is to fully fund IDEA. Congress initially promised that they would fund up to 40% of the cost of educating students with disabilities. And it's now, I think, about 12%. I'd have to check the actual number. But fully funding IDEA would be a significant help and refocusing our attention. Instead of focusing on how to destroy this department, start focusing on how we can improve education for these students. We've made a lot of progress in 50 years, and we can make a lot more progress in the next 50 years.
Thank you. And I have done several episodes on IDEA to celebrate the anniversary, and everyone has said that we need more money.
Mhm.
Um, everyone needs. Everyone said that IDEA, Congress hasn't ever fulfilled their promise um, to people with disabilities. So hopefully they will. Has IDEA been always supported by both parties?
Yes, that's a very good question, Liz. IDEA has always been bipartisan. We've had both Democratic and Republican champions over the years for educating students with disabilities. President Ford signed IDEA when it was first passed in 1975, and we've been so pleased that we've had such good support from both Republicans and Democrats, and I am hoping that that support will continue on a bipartisan basis.
And just for people to understand, bipartisan means both parties, right?
That's right. Both Republicans and Democrats have supported IDEA for 50 years.
And I also understand that disability rights part are bipartisan, and this is a disability rights issue.
That's exactly right, Liz. Disability rights have always been bipartisan. We had both parties supporting the ADA and other critically important legislation, and we need to keep that support from both parties.
Thank you, Stephanie, for helping us understand better what's happening with the department and for your advocacy so students with disability can learn just like everyone else. This is Disability Policy for All with Liz, and I'm Liz Weintraub, Senior Advocacy Specialist at AUCD. Thank you, Stephanie, again.
And Liz, if I may just say to thank you again for having me on, but even more for all of your leadership over the years.
Thank you very much. Bye.
Bye.